So, talking about, being successful, you have attained a great measure of success, being the president of the university. And you have a lot of demands on your time and a lot of responsibilities. How do you personally find time to make health a priority and take care of yourself?
Finding time to make health a priority is a well-posed question, because I believe that's what we must do more intentionally. Taking care of our health, enjoying recreational activity, exercise, for many lifestyles, and particularly I think perhaps among our young people, is something one does in their free time. As we, depending on the professions we pick and the lifestyles we lead, much of our time, and my time in particular, is very closely scheduled. And therefore you must find time. It must be a deliberate activity, not almost, in my case, actually scheduled, in order that you pay attention to this important facet of what it means to be alive. Mm-hmm. So these are a couple of examples of some very deliberate things. Scheduling deliberate time for exercise, mm-hmm. Trying to schedule deliberate time for broadening activities. In fact, if I might, let me observe that I get asked a lot about stress. And it's because there's some assumption, I assume, that there are a lot of external opportunities for stress in my particular career choice, my particular position. One discovers, when you think a little about stress, that everyone, regardless of stage in life, is susceptible to the ill effects of stress. Now, by the way, I am not one who believes that the absence of stress is necessarily a good thing. We need a little tension in the cable in order to pull ourselves along. Too little and we don't really grow, and too much and we snap the cable, and we don't want to do that. So everyone feels stress at different levels. The second thing an interesting observation, it seems to me, is that in almost every case when I talk to people about stress, our students, other faculty, colleagues in the administration, they share with me, and think about this, how narrowing stress is. When you're under stress, you seem to focus narrowly on the thing that is the irritant and the concern. And consequently, for those periods that you do that, you fail to be a more complete person. In fact, you're willing to sacrifice, because that's become so obsessive. The stress has become so obsessive. Sacrifice proper eating, or eating at all for a period, mm-hmm. And certainly exercise and other things that expand your mind. Recreational activity, recreational reading. One becomes a much narrower individual. And so that's why I've used the word broadening before. The disciplines, it seems to me, that help address stress are those which restore us broadly to be more fully alive, have time for contemplation, have time for recreation. I've said that wrong. Make time for contemplation, making time for recreation, having disciplines about how we communicate. The third observation about stress, at least as it relates to me, is the assumption that, again, owing to my position, I somehow handle it better than others, and that's not true. I have not mastered it. But I do share these observations as appropriate coping disciplines that I would welcome others to add and to share with me what they do. But I think paying attention to when one is, even recognizing when one is under stress and how it narrows you, and being able to think back to the big picture. Mm-hmm. Two other coping mechanisms besides how one uses one's time are one, sharing. Having a circle of friends, mm-hmm. being unafraid to take advantage of services, having confidence in the people around you are enormously important ways to deal with stress. And again, when we are focused and narrow, we imagine that no one could help. And in fact, we imagine that we're bothering others by sharing our stress with them. So having others around, I am so fortunate to be surrounded by just wonderfully capable and caring colleagues. The students themselves, I thank them in a communication last year, how I had students emailing me saying, you know, we heard your father died, how are you doing? Or other, you know, other sorts of things like that. I must tell you, there are wonderful stress breakers when you realize that other people do care and other people want to care. And finally, along this line of understanding the narrowing of stress, I personally find it very helpful to have spent some of my contemplative time trying to get in touch with some of the most basic understandings of what it means to be alive. I mean, do you have that? Do our students, do others say, you know, to really be alive, I need to have a certain amount of love in my life, I need to have a certain amount of physical activity in my life, and I have some absolute things that are very important to me. And I wonder if we should challenge ourselves to do that. Very personally, I will tell you that for my own, in my own case, much of that comes from my religious discipline. To be very honest with you, of what is fundamental, what is rock bottom, what is really important. When I might be stressing out over what others consider to be an important speech, or stressing out over some particularly difficult challenge that's facing our campus or our community, to be able to say, but underneath it all is the most important things, and remind oneself of that.
That's fantastic. That's very insightful. And you actually touched on each one of like the 4 pillars of wellness that we're going to talk about: the physical, mental, social, and spiritual.
Well, there must be something to those 4 pillars. Then at least for me there are. No, I'm glad we got to do that unprompted.
Exactly, yeah.